The absolute first time you hear this name, you might physically flinch. Sumac. Right here in North America, that word is typically heavily accompanied by a blazing red hazard warning. Poison sumac. Touch it, and you break out in a violent rash. So why on earth are top-tier chefs casually sprinkling it all over your food? A catastrophic culinary mix-up? Absolutely not. Sumac is, in reality, a profoundly bizarre spice. It is a meticulous blend of ancient botany, the brutal harshness of the desert, and a heavy dash of merchant cunning. All of this flawlessly forges a vibrant crimson-red powder carrying a razor-sharp tart bite. Let's actively explore what truly makes up sumac. Fundamentally, sumac actively operates as a literal dry acid. It delivers a flawlessly tart punch without soaking your outrageously expensive grilled steak in liquid. I have personally watched countless Texas pitmasters fumble with this exact concept. They violently toss the spice jar aside, blindly assuming it is just some dirt-cheap paprika. A catastrophic mistake. Roughly 35 distinct plant species belonging to the rose genus share the common moniker of sumac. Bizarrely enough, it shares the exact same botanical bloodline as mangoes, cashews, and pistachios. Standard run-of-the-mill spices constantly hide their true essence deep inside their seeds. Think black pepper, mustard, or cumin. But the sumac seed itself is absolute garbage. It is as hard as a literal rock, completely, utterly tasteless. It will even unleash a harsh, violently bitter astringency if you foolishly decide to boil it. Absolutely all of its spectacular essence lies right on the surface, that thin, spongy outer husk. That velvety fuzz tightly clinging to the exterior of the dense berry clusters. That is exactly where a colossal payload of malic acid is actively housed. This specific acid violently generates that signature fiercely bright tartness. And strictly because it merely clings loosely to the outside, ground sumac relentlessly maintains a coarse, gritty texture, worlds apart from other flawlessly smooth, finely milled spices. This hard truth directly triggers a fatal, devastating weakness. A vulnerability that can violently wipe out an entire forager's absolute best efforts overnight. Harvesting sumac is absolutely not a walk in the park. It is a brutal, high-stakes gamble against the weather. The berries violently ripen into a blazing red hue right at the tail end of summer. But rainwater is its absolute sworn mortal enemy. Nature is incredibly ironic, isn't it? Rain breathes literal life into the world. But for sumac, rain equates to absolute annihilation. The malic acid clinging to that fuzz is aggressively water-soluble. All it takes is one single, torrential downpour. That entire fiercely guarded tart payload is washed completely clean. Just look at the case of John Charles Farrell, a highly seasoned veteran forager based out of Minnesota. He once personally witnessed a literal catastrophe following a heavy summer downpour. Those blazing red sumac clusters instantly morphed into an utterly bland mush. Farrell explicitly described it as being as violently tasteless as literally chewing on a wet newspaper. But hold on. Nature always harbors a spectacularly genius self-healing mechanism. It merely requires 2 scorching afternoons of direct sunlight, temperatures aggressively hitting the 80-degree Fahrenheit mark. That sticky lemony exudate automatically regenerates right there on the branch. A profoundly bizarre biological miracle. The subsequent drying process is equally unforgiving. Farrell conducted a fiercely precise scientific measurement. He aggressively dried a sample branch weighing exactly 50.9 grains directly at 95 degrees Fahrenheit. After exactly 2 flat hours, the moisture violently evaporated, leaving a mere 30 grains. Nearly half of the total mass vanished into thin air, strictly to fiercely preserve that highly concentrated tart essence. Have you ever actually asked yourself, why exactly is humanity so violently obsessed with such a catastrophically risky harvest? Literally betting an entire crop purely on a microscopic layer of fuzz? The answer absolutely does not lie within this century. It is buried deep at the bottom of the ocean from 1,000 years ago. Right here in America, the lemon is the undisputed king of tartness. But Western history once echoed a completely different narrative. Long before the lemon violently conquered the entirety of Europe, the Roman Empire fiercely craved sumac. They aggressively utilized it to inject a sharp acidic punch into their outrageously lavish banquets. The very name sumac is deeply rooted in the Arabic word samaca, literally translating to dark red. It was the absolute culinary power that completely monopolized the dining tables of ancient merchants. From fiercely charred Levantine grilled meats straight to medieval Arabic cookbooks, it is the absolute soul of the legendary za'atar blend, flawlessly slicing through the heavy richness of sesame seeds. It is aggressively dusted over deeply refreshing faddish salads and the spectacular Palestinian roast chicken dish, moussakhan. However, its sheer power shattered far beyond the kitchen walls. Let's aggressively rewind time straight back to the 1970s. Marine archaeologists dove deep into the treacherous waters off the coast of Rhodes, Greece. They successfully unearthed the shattered remains of an 11th century merchant vessel. The ultimate treasure locked deep inside its cargo hold absolutely was not solid gold bars. It was a colossal, staggering payload of sumac berries. Cutthroat merchants actively hauled it across the globe at an astronomically high premium. It was a literal medicinal tonic, an aggressive antiseptic heavily prescribed to fiercely combat diarrhea and asthma. Even modern medical science has been forced to tip its hat. Back in 2016, a rigorous clinical trial led by researcher Ardolani definitively confirmed that sumac actively slashes blood pressure in hypertensive patients. Its massive payload of polyphenols and flavonoids aggressively operates as a heavily fortified shield, violently neutralizing highly destructive free radicals. Sumac was once a literal life-saving medicine, a colossal global trade legacy. So exactly why, right here in modern-day North America, is this exact name so violently shackled to the concept of death? This fear is completely and utterly well-founded. Most of us have heard the strict, terrifying warnings from our parents during deep woods camping trips. You must avoid poison sumac at all costs. You must stay away. You must not touch it. This is a profound, bitter irony in the history of botanical taxonomy, the delicious spice you consume every single day. Bearing the exact same name, sumac, it literally shares the exact same botanical family as poison ivy and poison oak. The absolute #1 enemy of human skin is poison sumac. Its scientific classification is Toxicodendron vernix, growing wildly deep inside the deadly, treacherous swamps of North America. Touching it is a literal biological catastrophe. The urushiol oil locked tightly inside its sap will instantly, violently trigger excruciatingly painful, severely blistering rashes. The rule of differentiation is actually dead simple. It is the literal razor-thin boundary separating a delicious meal from an emergency room visit. Edible sumac strictly belongs to the Rus genus. Its berries are a blazing, vibrant red, tightly wrapped in a fine, velvety fuzz. They always grow fiercely, thrusting straight up into the sky, proudly upright. And the highly toxic twin? It is exponentially more cunning. Its berries are completely smooth and violently pale white. They grow in drooping, sagging clusters hanging toward the muddy ground like a literal omen of death. However, that absolutely does not mean the red sumac is completely harmless. Even the edible variety of sumac, the exact second it steps outside the kitchen walls, wields enough sheer power to violently obliterate the most heavily fortified structures. Do you think sumac is merely something casually sprinkled over a plate of hummus? In reality, it actively bent and molded the entire textile and heavy manufacturing industries. The entire anatomy of the sumac plant houses a colossal payload of tannins, specifically pyrogallol. Thanks entirely to this specific chemical trait, it aggressively became the absolute core raw material for tanning leather, forging the legendary Morocco leather. Ultra-lightweight, incredibly supple, and flawlessly retaining its vibrant dyes. But this exact power actively concealed unimaginable risks. Back in 1888, expert Arthur Lee officially documented a highly bizarre, devastating maritime catastrophe. Finely milled sumac powder was being hauled on a commercial cargo ship right alongside colossal monolithic blocks of pristine white marble. A microscopic trace of moisture seeped into the hold. The sumac dust clinging to the stone instantly, violently morphed into an extremely aggressive purple dye. It seeped deep into the core of the marble to an extraordinary, terrifying depth, completely obliterating the structural integrity, completely obliterating the pristine color, completely obliterating the immense value of those priceless stones. Its sheer dyeing power even violently reached straight into the rigid laws of royalty. Over in Japan, sumac actively forged the color korozen, a spectacularly vibrant yellow-brown hue heavily overshadowed by absolute authority. It was a strictly, completely forbidden color. The absolute right to wear this specific hue was fiercely reserved exclusively for the Emperor of Japan. In the Middle East, the great scholar Ibn Battus actively blended sumac extract directly with tree resin, meticulously forging an eternal, indestructible red ink. Right here in North America, its role is equally profoundly bizarre. Dried sumac wood possesses the shocking ability to violently fluoresce under long-wave ultraviolet light. This staggering scientific discovery was officially documented by R. Bruce Hoadley back in 2000. Its spongy, pithy core was actively hollowed out by Native Americans to forge smoking pipes. The Oglala Sioux tribe fiercely utilized it during highly sacred medical rituals. The Cahuilla tribe out in the American Southwest called it naket. mixing it directly into their water purely to survive the brutal, unforgiving desert heat. Furthermore, according to a rigorous 1998 study by Avatabile and Samataro, dried sumac berry clusters serve as the absolute perfect smoke fuel. The dense, heavy smoke it generates actively calms aggressive bee colonies exponentially more effectively than any synthetic chemical ever could. And don't even think about attempting to clear out its root system with a standard lawnmower. It is utterly useless. The fiercely tough woody stems will violently snap back and instantly shoot up brand new sprouts. The absolute only natural predator capable of completely wiping out this violently invasive plant is, believe it or not, herds of goats. They aggressively chew the bark completely clean, ruthlessly severing every single lifeline of the young shoots. It is powerful, stubbornly resilient, and fiercely wild out in nature. But that purple powder you are gripping tightly in your hand at the grocery store today might very well be yet another colossal historical deception. Walk straight into your kitchen, tear open your spice cabinet. Look closely at that jar of sumac. Does it boast a blazing, vibrant, bright red hue exactly like the heavily edited photos in a culinary magazine? If it does, I am afraid you have been utterly deceived. All natural dried sumac berries absolutely never retain that blindingly bright red color. It violently hemorrhages its pigments the exact second it is exposed to the open air, rapidly deteriorating into a deeply unappealing muddy purplish brown or a dull, lifeless red. To aggressively deceive the eyes of the consumer, a massive wave of commercial brands have secretly, silently dyed it with harsh industrial food coloring, artificially forcing it to glow bright red right there on the grocery store shelves. They absolutely don't just dye it, they aggressively adulterate it to violently maximize their profit margins. According to rigorous analysis from industry experts that we have cross-referenced, standard supermarket sumac is heavily cut with a colossal volume of plain wheat flour. The core motive? To aggressively suppress that fiercely harsh natural tartness and to artificially inflate the net weight. Or it is completely drowned in heavy sea salt, a highly common preservation tactic utilized over in Turkey. Only the absolute most exorbitantly expensive, top-tier pure varieties, such as the meticulously handcrafted Baladi sumac sourced directly from Palestine. Only they flawlessly retain their 100% pristine, unadulterated essence. Pre-ground sumac literally only survives for a few short months before violently losing the entirety of its flavor profile, unless you aggressively hoard it inside a deeply airtight container, far, far away from the scorching heat of your stovetop. Otherwise, what you are ultimately sprinkling onto your steak is nothing more than utterly tasteless sawdust. Simply put, sumac is absolutely not just a run-of-the-mill spice. Hidden deeply behind that velvety trail of powder resting on your grilled meat is the literal sweat of desperate foragers violently racing against the pouring rain. It is a life-saving medicine drifting amidst the shattered wreckage of an ancient merchant ship. It is an aggressively arrogant annihilator of pristine marble. And it is the absolute most spectacular, masterful deception of the human palate in the entire history of mankind. Sometimes, the absolute most seemingly mundane things carry the crushing, colossal weight of thousands of years of evolution. The very next time you are enjoying a lavish dinner at a Mediterranean restaurant, stare deeply and closely at that dark purplish-red streak. You absolutely are not just tasting a dry acid. You are physically tasting an entire grandiose legacy,